Good afternoon to all those on site. Good morning and good evening for those joining a bit further apart. I'm Koen Dekeyser from the European Centre for Development Policy Management, and I have the honor to present to you our Agri-Food Systems Strategies project. So I'll go into first explaining a bit about the project, then about our sustainable food system approach that we utilized in case studies in Nakuru County, Kenya, and the Arusha region, Tanzania, on which we developed pathways on how to integrate indigenous vegetables or traditional African vegetables stronger into the local food systems. And then I'll conclude about our experiences working with indigenous vegetables and with our food system approach. The SASS project, or Sustainable Agrifood Systems Strategies project, ran from 2017 to 2020. Given that it's a complete project, I'll hope to explain everything in 12 minutes. But it was a multidisciplinary ECDPM-led consortium featuring multitudes of Italian universities, Kenyan and Tanzanian partners like the Sokoine University or the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. Its objectives was to study the sustainability of local food system and see if indigenous vegetables could improve the sustainability of the local food systems, and to go beyond that, to develop pathways to support interventions on how to integrate indigenous vegetables better into the food system. We used the food system approach, the advantages being that we could provide a much more comprehensive view of the food system, so not only looking at production, but also at distribution, processing, consumption, the resource base that undercuts all these processes, the marketing, policies, and technologies engaged with indigenous vegetables, and its outcomes, food and nutrition security, and so on. We then developed our own approach to analyzing the food system, consisting of 4 pillars. One was a food system analysis or mapping of the different activities, drivers, and outcome of the local food system, being the Arusha region in Tanzania and the Nakuru County in Kenya. We then analyzed their sustainability aspects of it, and then the political economy factors. So these are what are the power dynamics in the food system? Who holds the power to change things? Who are the most marginal, the more marginalized players? What are the policy frameworks, and so on and so forth? And we used these 3 components to then develop pathways on how to create interventions that would create a more sustainable food system. So the case studies were in the Arusha region in Tanzania and Nakuru County in Kenya. We had a consortium of political scientists, microbiologists, agronomists, economists, nutritionists, sociologists, and anthropologists studying various aspects of those food systems. Why indigenous vegetables? I'll just go very quickly over that. But because of its perception of nutrition density, it could improve the diversity of on-farm farming. It could contribute to climate change resilience. It was already embedded in the food culture of the area. It might contribute to equity, because what we see in Kenya, for example, many of the farmers are female. And it could, an increased integration might provide economic opportunities. This is an example of on the left, you see an example of a food system dynamics map that we made regarding the processing of indigenous vegetables. On the right, you see a stakeholder and governance analysis that we made of the various actors in production, distribution, retail, and consumption of indigenous vegetables. the cross-cutting issues in our 2 research sites in Kenya and Tanzania was that there was a high interest in indigenous vegetables. There seemed to be a growing urban consumer base that is interested in indigenous vegetables because they perceive it as very healthy, and because of the rise of sort of lifestyle diseases related to diet, such as overweight and certain cancers and so on, indigenous vegetables were looked upon as something, going back to the roots, going back to traditional diet, healthy diet. The seed system was strongly informal, but worked actually quite well. And there seems to be, the formal seed system seemed to be quite weak in supplying good indigenous vegetable seeds. There were also some high-end market interest, restaurants, tourism, and so on, that wanted to feature indigenous vegetables on their menus. And there seemed to be a high potential for value editing and processing, because currently indigenous vegetables were mostly sold fresh. The challenges were that in both areas there was the agricultural policy or food policy was mostly oriented towards the staple crop subsidies or staple crop production, and far less on the more nutritious vegetables. There was a lacking structured distribution system. It was mostly informal, quite ad hoc. It worked quite well, but there was also lots of post-harvest losses. Also due to the perishability of the leafy vegetables. Because most was rain-fed production, the supply was also rather erratic. There was missing governance of the whole supply chain. There were, in Kenya, for example, perceptions of lower food safety of the indigenous vegetable production in one area because of bad water quality. And also what has been raised is that indigenous vegetables can take up, or certain indigenous vegetables can take up more cooking time and processing time. So we developed then pathways to stronger integrate indigenous vegetables. This pathway consists of an issue or a problem related to traditional vegetables, for example, access to fineness or the food safety issue. We then developed an entry point for change. So where can we best address these issues? And we looked at actors and stakeholders to find some sort of a coalition of willing actors to work on that issue. And we organized these issues along production, distribution, consumption, and governance. For example, we make an interest-influence diagram for the actors and stakeholders involved in indigenous vegetables, so that we could identify sort of in the upper right corner those that are both interested and influential for indigenous vegetables. So they would be sort of our more natural actors to look to. And here, for example, these actors would be more less influential and less interested, so they would be sort of less looked upon to marshal change. We then made a trade-off and synergy analysis about our pathways to see if our pathways somehow would strengthen each other, or which pathways would strengthen each other, and which pathways would sort of create a trade-off and would sort of not work together very well. So we see, for example, that seed reform or reform of the seed sector would work particularly well with some labeling schemes or some more public procurement, but not so much synergetic with other pathways. In conclusion, regarding indigenous vegetable, we found on both sides that potential is there, but obstacles as well. Obstacles doesn't seem to, well, obstacle in the sense of deeper integration into the local food system is that there's not a single obstacle, so neither a single intervention would create the deeper integration into the food system. A package of intervention can increase success, and then we analyzed indeed if these interventions or these packages could trade off or synergize between each other. Regarding our food system approach that we contributed, the advantages was that we provided a very broad view of the food system. We could have multiple sustainability dimensions analyzed. We could be more inclusive because of the wider view, and we could focus more on trade-offs and synergies. The disadvantage of us using this approach is quite complex, and in a way, certain depth would be traded off with wideness. You can't go very wide and deep at the same time, because that would increase complexity manifold. And it took a bit of time initially in 2017 to convince partners or to about the food system approach and its advantages and so on. I'd like to thank all of our interviewees, all of our partners and our funder. And I would also like to thank you for your time listening to us. If you're interested, want to give feedback, suggestion, or criticize, you can contact us at DTails, and we'll be happy to hear from you. Thank you very much.